And welcome everyone to another edition of Lead Better. Glad that you're with us and glad to have Lisa Magnuson here today. How are you, Lisa?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm good, and I'm glad you're here because we're going to get into this unusual territory of. It doesn't use this word in the field note, but I've heard this referred to as ghost mentors. It's like the
Oh,
people that they don't. It's not on their business card. It doesn't actually say that on their desk placard that they're the mentor. But the field note is entitled, "Who are the best informal coaches and mentors on your team?" It's field note 1636. We always announce that just so you can keep track as we've been doing these the field notes daily for 4.5 years, and we've been doing these conversations for a couple of years. And so glad that you're with us. So this aspect of the official mentor and coach as opposed to the unofficial. Now you technically are an official coach, like that's what you actually are. So in organizations though, everybody is a leader to some degree, has some responsibility for people around them. But it's an interesting idea to lean in on these people who kind of are like the connective tissue of the organization, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I think when I look back at my career, I think the vast majority of the mentors and coaches that I've had have been these informal coachees and mentors. Yeah. So it's about finding the people, I think, who, some of them raise their hand and some of them are people that you just kind of start watching and going, I like what you're doing. And how do I kind of glom on to that a little bit and learn and get closer to you so that we can be side by side and I can pick up through just being a part of watching you do what you do every day.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think you're right. I don't think I'd really contemplated that until the way that you just said it, which is when I do think about the people that were really significant, they probably tended to be not the person that was the person I reported to. Not in every case, but a lot of the time. And that's a really interesting thing. And nobody asked them necessarily to come alongside me. So what do you think that is? What's the characteristic in some people and not others that they are just that kind of person?
I mean, the way I think about it is there's people who say that's not my job, and there's people
Hmm.
who would never say that's not my job. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
so there's this idea of like, what is it that I'm here to do? And some people are just going to show up and they're going to look and contribute. And a part of the ways that they contribute is by making the people around them better. They're just going to do it without asking. And I think then
Hmm.
there's some other people who have a much more narrowly defined sense of what they're here to do. And you tell me the job and I do it. And then I'm good because I've achieved the task that you asked me to do. So I think it's looking for those people who would never say, that's not my job. It's not my job to
Right.
coach
Yeah.
them. It's not my job to mentor. I'm an individual contributor. They just don't see themselves in that narrow of a view.
Right. Yeah. So the lessons for leaders here, and that's kind of the main theme throughout this field note, that the good leaders are the ones who just know that this is the truth. Now, maybe they're in an organization of 25 people and it's kind of evident that this person always helps on. There's no official onboarding department,
Mhm.
but you just know who helps. You just know how it goes. But the good leaders, particularly maybe in complicated organizations or large ones, they would do well if they're not already doing it to be aware to say, who are these people? I need to know who these people are. I would think that in the kind of organizations that you're in, you probably see leaders who are good at this, and you probably see a lot of leaders who just aren't.
Oh, and just are a little oblivious to how the team is interacting with each other
Yeah,
and how
right.
people are influencing each other in good ways and bad ways. It's interesting. I was reflecting on the field note this morning with my husband before we left for work, and he was
Hmm.
calling out that this might not always be a good thing. Right. You might not always have a positive influence on these people who are, seeking out to influence and coach and mentor other people without asking. And so I think it behooves the leader to pay attention to who's doing
Hmm.
that, to also get a bit of quality control in the mix of let's make
Right.
sure that
Yeah.
the things that we're passing along to our peers are actually the behaviors and the skills that we want replicated across the
Yeah.
organization.
Because it's not, and maybe this is part of what your husband was saying, not just for quality control, but you also know that there's the person that says, "Welcome to the team. Let me tell you how it really is. Don't
Oh, yeah.
listen to that guy. This place, they don't really believe that." And
Yeah.
they're very cynical, right? And they
Mhm.
can actually poison that atmosphere as much as actually help.
Yes.
I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting. He always challenges my thinking, and he did it again this morning with that twist on it of okay, that's good as long as it's the right people. I'm
Right.
like, yeah, great point.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole different field note for the leader on how to deal with that person.
Inspiration
So
for future.
yeah. So, but to the extent that the field note is on track and saying a leader
Yeah,
might be like, look, I've got, 500 people and there's all these sub managers and all that, but I need to have people on my team saying, she's an all-star.
yeah,
This guy's great.
hmm,
Always helping. And you might not actually hear that from that person's leader. You might actually just have to be hearing it from the people on the ground. Like when you have new people that have come into the organization, maybe that's a question to ask, which is, if you're the leader and you're like, I know you went through the 90-day review and I get to look at all of those things, but I'm glad to talk to you because sometimes there's stuff we don't see on paper. Like what's really made the difference? And if you start to hear that person's name, like this person mentions that person, the other person, you'd be like,
hmm,
oh, this is the person that tends to really be the magnet for improvement. And that's a wonderful thing for a leader to know.
oh, absolutely. And I think if you create like leaders really set the tone for the conversations within their teams, right? Within their organizations. And if you normalize part of the conversation being about how did you get this done? Who did you work with to achieve what
Hmm.
you achieved? And have people reflect on who's helping them be successful. I think you create the conversations where those insights come out because
Hmm.
most people will realize there's very few things that we do in work or in life that we haven't done without some support and help. So I think if a leader can normalize that I'm going to say, talk to me about what you got done here, but also tell me a little bit about who you worked with and who helped
Hmm.
you get that done. I agree. You'll start to see the patterns of who is really stepping up.
Mm.
I love, it ties back directly to the way we define leaders at the firm here, the way we think about it as anyone
Right.
who makes people and situations better, right? It really are those people who are looking around and saying, what else
Hmm.
can I do? Where else can I add value? And I think if we talk about how we get things done and who we work through to do that, we'll start to uncover who those people are.
Right. Yeah. Now, a key part in this field note then is it helps a leader to know who's good at this. It
Mhm.
also helps when that leader actually does end up observing and thanking the person who is filling this informal coaching mentorship role, that expression of gratitude to that person tends to be well received, and it tends to amplify that
Mm.
behavior not only with that person but it kind of to spread through the organization, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it starts when we're young kids, when we're playing on sports teams and there's the captains on the team, but
Hmm.
then there's also the young players that just have grit and drive and energy
Hmm.
and enthusiasm. And as coaches and their fellow players lift those people up with
Right.
these informal rewards after games and things like that. That's really what spurs not just more of that work, but that really permeates the culture of a team, the culture of an organization when that becomes what we celebrate.
Yeah. And that also is sometimes then the person who might not be the person that you pick out as the all-star. I remember hearing I think Dr. Rob Gilbert tell a favorite story of his about the kid in high school that's got the D1 scholarship, and he kind of
Mhm.
goes to the coach and he says, "But I was never the captain of the team."
Yeah.
And the coach said, "Well, you were the best player on the team, but you were not the best player for the team." And
Hmm.
sometimes that is a different person, even in our kind of organizations. But we would like that to spread. We would like the captain's class, to use the name of that book, to
Hmm.
kind of have that ethos be in our organization. So the field note talks about recognizing those people, thanking them, maybe even giving a kind of a year at the holiday party, kind of a nod or an honor to that. Do you think that does work, or do you actually kind of think that maybe some of these people, they don't want the external recognition, at least publicly? Maybe
Yeah.
they don't mind a private thank you from the leader. What do you think is the truth there?
What's interesting about it, what strikes me is that while I think it in some cases is appreciated, what's striking is that I don't think it's necessary for them. I think the
Hmm.
people who are already doing it, it's not necessary for them. What's interesting though is that I think the public recognition might make showing up in that way more appealing for others. who it doesn't come naturally to you. So I think the public recognition is not necessarily always for the person that you're recognizing, but it's for demonstrating that that's the type of behavior you want to see from other people who might not be thinking about showing up in that way without a little bit of prompting.
Yeah, right. You know, I think we would wish in our world that we had a lot of these stories where there's like really rapid growth, right? Where there's, and I remember when I first joined Admired Leadership, I kind of spent the first year before we started building the Admired Leadership platform, where I was out and coaching and dealing with clients, so I could just understand all the ways that these things, you know, work in our organization with our clients. And I was at an organization that was really growing rapidly. And you see cultural challenges there. And I have a friend right now, his firm, I think about 75 people. They were just acquired by a much larger organization, a really spectacular deal for them. And now they're going to actually have to not only double in size, but probably more than that. So they're going to need to hire 100 new people over the next, 6 months or a year. And so that can be a terrific thing. That can also kind of threaten the culture if you're not kind of pulling it together and getting everybody on board in the same way. And in those areas of growth, when things are really accelerating, sometimes, you're going pretty fast in the fast lane here. And so sometimes you really need those people that we're talking about in this field note to hold everything together. So we do want and need and depend on this.
Oh, absolutely. I work with a client who has, over the last year or two, been transitioning from a largely outsourced contractor model to an in-house staff model, and tremendous growth, right? They went from a very small, low single digit, staff size to, tripling in size really within the course of a couple of months. And so their ability to identify these people and be not just hope that they do that, but really be intentional about asking them to show up in that way, setting them up to show up in that way, creating consistency and how that happens is, I think, what has made this transition so positive and the culture so strong. Now, there's always challenges, there's always hiccups, there's always, did we get the right person in that role or not? And course correcting along the way. But by and large, the ethos, the mission behind the organization, a lot of those things have stayed intact, largely thanks to the people who stepped into those roles. And so many of them went even above and beyond, just because that's who they are. And that's the nature of who they are, of what they were asked to do to help be that culture carrier as the organization grew. But gosh, thank goodness for those people. We need more and more of them.
Yeah. Well, and you used that phrase, the culture carrier, and that really is at the heart of this. And I always like the Seth Godin phrase, people like us do things like this. And that's what really this person is saying as people come on board, or maybe even shift within an organization. It might not be a brand new person, it might be just somebody in a different role. And they may need real apprenticeship or mentorship around certain skills. They may just need to kind of get a relationship connectivity. There's all kinds of pieces that would go into how you're accelerating their success.
Yeah.
And that can be a really wonderful thing. And I think that, the question I had here as we kind of have just a minute or two is, what if you're the person in the organization and your leader doesn't see what you're doing? They're not recognizing what you're doing. You wouldn't mind being thanked, but you're okay with it. What do you think we can all do, and why, to just be more of this kind of person, regardless of if anybody's paying attention?
Yeah. I mean, that's hard because you have to have a real intrinsic motivation to show up in this way on an ongoing basis. And so I think sometimes the people who celebrate other people's successes and demonstrate how tuned in they are to other people's successes and feel the glow and the benefit of that as well. And over time, they start to say, wow, Scott always knows what's going on with people, right? Scott's always lifting other people up. He's probably pretty close to what's making them successful. I think those are some ways to say, like, how do we lift others and we lift ourselves? And, I think about the recent field note on gratitude and watching gratitude be expressed. And I think spreading that is something that really creates that environment. And I think people pick up on who's leading those conversations over time and start to pay attention to that.
I am going to clip that audio as though it were perfectly real about me that you were saying that. I'll be playing that for my
Do-
family
Make it
over
your
and over
phone
again,
ringer.
just being like, this is what, because look, I do think that that is the wonderful thing, which is well, just think about it. If it's the person that maybe your husband was concerned about and talking about this morning, they're the person who, when somebody's coming on board, they're spreading the wrong message, or
Yeah.
they're making people more cynical, or pre-establishing sort of these bitter guardrails, or whatever that is. What does that say for you at the end of your career? What are people going to say about you when you're not in the room?
Yeah.
As opposed to if you're the person who just is always the words and actions you're using with people around you are reflecting a real noble heart, as David Cook says, and you're making those people and doing what we talk about in admired leadership all the time. You're making other people better, situations better, and that's just who you are. Well, that's going to go a long way, even if nobody recognizes it, but probably they will.
It's hard to imagine that over time that doesn't leave a mark.
Dynamite. Well, Lisa, always glad when you're with us on Lead Better. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, everybody.